Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White's and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Declined studies and the so-called Vienna Variation. The Vienna Variation we have explained so far with the most important strategical ideas and tactical shots of the opening, and today we're analyzing a new line. This line I think is really the sharpest line of the Queen's Gambit Declined, the Vienna Variation, because the methods that White and Black are applying are really beautiful attacking opportunities, are pinning ideas, decoys, deflections, double attacks, pawn breakthroughs. So we have already in an early stage of the game really beautiful tactical motifs. So if you don't know what to do, you will probably get smashed in an early stage of the game. So that's why I think it's very important to know this line, because White will probably test you with this very aggressive method, and as I said, if you don't know what to do, this will be not a pleasant game for you. So that's why I think we have to know this particular line, so if you want to study this very sharp opening. So let's check out now what is the new line and how we should counterplay this idea. So here of course our main moves are d4 knight to f6, after c4 e6 we have after move knight to f3, the anti-Nimzo or counter Nimzo Indian setup. We play simply d5 knight to c3, and after we have reached the 3 knights variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, now comes the Vienna Variation move, which is of course d takes c4. And we have covered many lines. Today we're continuing still this sharp line with the move e4. If you ask yourself the question what happens if White plays e3, please check out our series from the beginning, part 1, part 2, part 3 and so on, because in that videos we have already explained this particular lines, but also very important different sidelines that can happen to you, and you don't want to get surprised of course by your opponent. So as I said, please watch the series from the beginning, because many of these lines were not covered simply in this video. So here after move d takes c4, we're still analyzing this very aggressive method with the move e4. Now we play bishop to b4, and recently we have covered these lines with the move bishop to c4, which led into these lines with knight takes e4. So okay, but today we're analyzing the very aggressive counter pin sort of with the move bishop to g5, and notice that this bishop to g5 is of course a dangerous pin against the queen on d8. There are ideas to play e5 immediately, and also what Black threatens sort of is this very aggressive move b5. If Black manages to play b5 move in a decent way, then of course the Black's position could be really good, because we have gained the pawn here on the queen side, and if we cement the position with a6, b5, c6, then it's a good game. Although we could get challenged with the move e5, but we can also always counterattack the bishop with the move h6. So now after move bishop to g5, in my opinion, there are simply two good ways to proceed from this point. So we can play this very aggressive c5 move. This is one method, and I think this method you'll use if you're maybe a more tactical player, if you're much more of an attacker. But if you're maybe a more positional player, if you maybe want to have a decent position and you don't want to complicate things too much, then you could probably play this h6 move, which is perfectly fine, because notice that after bishop to h4, g5 is a very annoying move. Then also knight to e4 could happen. So that's, as I said, your choice. We'll analyze both of these lines in this video. So we'll play now the aggressive line with the move c5, but we'll play also the more positional line with the move h6. So here after move c5, what your opponent could do is of course the move e5. After bishop to c4, if that happens, then you should simply proceed with c takes d4. Here after move knight to d4, you have to play, I think now in this particular move, you have to take bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and notice now that we have provoked many weaknesses in White's position. First of all, we have an isolated pawn on c3. We have also the weak pawn on e4, which could maybe in the near future be protected with the move f3, but notice that the pieces of White's are a little bit loose. They are not connected, so we have to use now this moment, and we have to play simply queen to a5. The problem for White is here that there are many lines, but you don't have actually a line that gives White here immediately sort of an advantage. For instance, even if you try bishop to f6, it doesn't matter. We simply play queen to c3, and notice that after king to f1, this is a mistake that you could make. Maybe you could try this one. Queen takes c4. This is simply not good. I think many of us would play this line like this, but this is after king to g1, not good. You could maybe take g takes f6, but now you fall for this beautiful threat with rook to c1, and you have to step back, you have to move the queen somewhere, and you see the bishop is saying what you could do maybe to prolong the game is queen takes c1, queen takes c1, but I think this is simply game over. So be careful, as I said, with this idea. So be careful, because many of these things will happen to you. As we said, after move queen to a5 and bishop to f6, okay, you could take queen takes c3, but now after king to f1 you have to simply take out the bishop on f6, not the bishop on c4. Now I think you have a decent game. We have here a 4 versus 4 situation on the king side, we have a 2 versus 1 situation on the queen side. Okay, our king is a little bit naked, but okay, white's king is also not secured, white's king is also not on an optimal square, white's king didn't castle also. So as I said, we're continuing now the situation with the plus a pawn, and I think it's a decent position. Bishop to d7 could be played, then knight to c6, rook to d8, maybe we can even hide here with our king to e7, or maybe we can play something like, I don't know, king to e7, rook to e8, and maybe try sort of a path with our king to maybe escape here to h6. So we could try many things. Even kingside castling immediately I think is working here for black. So as I said, this is a position that is in my opinion simply perfectly fine for black. So after move queen to a5, here white doesn't want to play the game like this. White doesn't want to take out the knight. Now white could many times play the move knight to b5, and now again you have to know what you're doing, because what you don't want to do is to castle immediately. This is not good, because you get simply bishop to f6, and after g takes f6, this is not the same position like before, because now notice that white's king is perfectly fine. White's king will castle, so white's king is not endangered, didn't lose the tempo with king to f1 or similar stuff. And now in the near future white's queen will sneak in after kingside castling, rook to e3, rook to g3 could happen. So I think you lose simply the tactical battle here around the g file. Here the queen to g4 move is immediately possible. So many beautiful attacking ideas simply for white. Notice also the lack of development here by black. Black has to still play with the knight, has to still play with the bishop in order to make some kind of an activity. So this is not the way to play the game. So after move knight to b5, what you should do is to play knight to e4. This lines we have covered also in our intro video, where I've showed you basically the most important traps that are possible in this lines. But still I wanted to cover more of these ideas, because after knight to e4, that's the only move that prolongs the game. You face probably this idea, queen to d4, and again it seems so that something went wrong. But now with kingside castling you can solve now really all of the positional problems, because okay, white can take queen to e4, but now it's very necessary to play the move a6, and from this point on again you have a decent game, you have equalized the game. That's now very important to say here, because what you do if white steps back of course from the defense, if and plays knight to d4, then we can take queen takes c3, and the position is again falling apart here for white. White could maybe counterplay with the move bishop to d3, but it doesn't matter, because still we can play f5. We can simply kick away the queen after queen to e2. Now we can take, white castles, and now with knight to c6 I think again we could have a decent position. Okay, maybe this pawn is weak, but also notice that the pawn on c3 is weak. We have also some activities on the a file, and in the near future what basically our goal would be is somehow maybe to push the pawn on e5. If we connect these two pawns here on e5 and f5 in a good way, then also e4 could happen, rook to e1, then maybe bishop to e6. So I think you could have sort of a good setup here. As I said, the engine gives here equal chances for both sides. So this position you face many times, but that's also sometimes the risk of the Vienna variation. Many times you have to give up your bishop pair in an early stage of the game. You can be the judge of this position. In my opinion, this is playable for black. So okay, what white could do instead of this bishop to c4 move is to play something like, I don't know, maybe d5 immediately. This could annoy you, but again, this is not something that should bother you, because if you know what you're doing, just takes e takes d5. Here if even e5 happens, then still we have h6. You can take, but we can take also. Here you can take maybe the pawn, but now rook to g8 doesn't matter. After queen to c2, maybe trying queenside castling, we play simply queen to e2, queen to e7, attacking bishop to e2, and now with bishop to d3. This is again a good setup. If we even queenside castling, doesn't matter, still we can play something like d4. So in my opinion it's a really good position here for black. Knight to c6 can follow, and still we have the flexibility to castle queenside. And notice with this 3 connected pawns here, with this sort of 5 versus 2 pawn majority on the queenside, I think you will destroy white for sure. So this is not something that white should do with the move d5. This is not a good position anymore for white. What white could do, and this is now the sharpest line that we're analyzing, is now an immediate move e5. And what to do now? The only way to make some things is of course to counterplay with c takes d4. If white takes now e takes f6, then we can still play g takes f6. Notice that now again 2 pieces are hanging, so we didn't lose actually a piece. So now maybe white could play bishop to h4, and now with knight to c6 we can even delay the move here, d takes c3, because still white cannot escape from these ideas. The cool part about this move knight to c6, if you take now the queen, if the queens are traded off on the d file, notice that the knight can also recapture, so that's why you don't have to take out with the king and lose maybe some tactics around the square f6 with bishop to f6, all similar idea. So as I said, d4 again leads into an equal game here for both sides. So here after move c takes d4, what you could face, and this is now the sharpest line, and from this point on you have to really study this opening theory really even by heart, because now you will probably face this very aggressive move. We took move queen to a4, we take knight to c6, and now you see there is this tension on around the square d4. The knight is hanging, so many times white will simply play now the move queenside castling, and the game is really becoming wilder and wilder. You see everything is hanging. We have here some kind of a tension, we have the tension on the d file, we have here the pin, we have also a very annoying pin by the queen against the knight. So this is simply a brutal and tactical position. But again, don't be scared so much, because again, if you know what you're doing, probably you could have really a good game, because now it's simply time to get rid of one of these problems. Because on the d file we had of course the tension. Now with the move bishop to d7, we're the one that are actually threatening something. We threaten also to take the knight on c3, maybe bishop to c3, and then also some ideas of knight to e5 are working, because the queen is now indirectly attacked by the bishop on d7. So now with the move bishop to d7, we reversed a little bit the situation. Now we're the one that are basically attacking. So here knight to e4 you face many times. So white is getting out of this mess here around the square c3 and continues the pressure here on this line. Really a beautiful line is this. After move bishop to e7, now comes a move that could bother you, but again, it doesn't have to necessarily bother you, because after e takes f6, we can still play g takes f6. And here after bishop to h4, now notice that okay, white has 4 pieces on the board, we have only 3, but we have here now really a brutal pawn storm. What is in my opinion now the best way here to proceed is to move a6. Notice that if bishop to c4 happens, then still we can play b5, and we can retake our piece and continue the game with a beautiful bishop pair. Then the b file could work, and I think white is going to get destroyed by the rook activity, by the bishop's activity on the queen side, by including maybe the queen into the game. So all of these pieces are aiming towards the queen side. So if this happens, this is a good position for black. So what after move a6, queen to c4 could happen, but now with the move e5, white gets challenged with the potential bishop to e6 move. If you try something like, I don't know, let's see, king to b1, it's not good, because you will face this idea. Bishop to e6, you're maybe playing queen to a4. b5 is still an opportunity. For instance, if you retreat with the queen to c2, many times the queen gets more and more attacked. With knight to b4, the game is over. You see the tension here around the square a2, queen to a5 will happen. So it's something that white could resign. So as I said, after move e5, there is now only one way for white to proceed here, and we have covered also in our intro video this line with the traps. Now white has to play the move knight to e5. It's really wild move that white has to play. Every other move is simply winning for black. Now after move knight to e5, what black shouldn't do is of course d takes e5. We have covered these traps so far. Now with knight to d6, you see king to f8 and you get checkmated. If you take, of course, with the bishop here, then the queen is lost on d8. So this is not something that black should do. Black has to take now with the move knight to e5, and now we have reached sort of a position that you face many times. So after move knight to e5, white could take, of course, queen to d4, and here what you could do after move sorry, my screen just moved. After move queen to d4 is to play rook to c8. We play check, king to b1, and now kingside castling is here perfectly fine, because it seems so that something is wrong here for black, because white could challenge here black's knight with the move f4, and the knight on e5 would be hanging. But now you have a beautiful counter attack with bishop to f5. You see the queen is attacked here. You have to trade off. The knight is hanging here. The rook activity on the c file is very good, so this other rook will come to the game. Notice that in this particular line, white is the one that has here a lack of development. Didn't play with the bishop, didn't play with the rook so far, so it's not a good position anymore for white. So this will be now our position. This after move knight to the e5, this will be a position that you face many times. I wanted to show you also some different examples. Here it was a gameplay by Lokvan Veli against Alexander Morozovich, in which Lokvan Veli played this very important move, knight to e5. We had knight to e5, here queen to d4, and now rook to c8 again, attacking the king, king to b1, and now kingside castling. As I said, this is something that you have to do. Again, I'm pointing out f4 is simply not good. Here white tried bishop to e2, bishop to f5, very good move, including more pieces into the game. We had a trades of queens, and now after move f3 we have king to g7, rook to the d8, rook takes d8. Here after a couple trades of rooks we had now this beautiful move, knight to g5, g4 here by Alexander Morozovich. If you take, of course, then we'll simply also take out this one. Also then this pawn is hanging, so it would be a good game then for black. After move knight to g4 we have king to c1, knight to e3, we have g4, knight to g4, we had here knight to g3, and now after move knight to h6, knight takes f5, knight takes f5, bishop to c2, bishop to f2, pardon me, and after a couple more moves both players agree to a draw. The engine gives here also equal chances, the material is equal, although black is up a pawn, but these are double pawns, so it doesn't matter. This should be probably a draw. So let's see now also a different example, again the same position, and I think you will face many times the position. Be careful, as I said, there are some tactical traps that you saw are possible, but if you know what you're doing, I think you could have a decent game. After move queen to d4, we had now a beautiful idea here by Wang Hao, queen to c7. This idea is more aggressive because of the fact that you're leaving a little bit your pawn unprotected on f6. But here after move king to b1, now bishop to f5. Here Wang Hao played really a beautiful attacking formation here. It didn't castle immediately, which is in my opinion even a slightly more aggressive approach here. After move queen to a4 we have king to f8, really good move, because after king to g7 the king is perfectly fine there, although it's of course not you don't want to have your king like this. You want to castle, of course, and you want to have a healthy pawn structure, but this pawn structure is simple as that. You have played this line, and now that's what you get out of this. Now with the move king to g7 we can include, of course, more pieces into the game. So we have here f3, we have king to g7, bishop to e2, now b5, of course. We have your fun here also on the queen side, queen to d4, and now rook to d8, attacking the queen, queen to e3, and now knight to c4. Really good moves here by Wang Hao. He basically found really beautiful squares for all of these pieces. We had here now bishop to c4, queen to c4, we had rook to c1, queen to e6, continue the pressure here around the square. E4, we had a rook to e1, and now rook from a to c8, including now all of these pieces into the game. Look at this bishop pair, perfect fine position here for black. So we had h3, and we have a rook to c4, king to a1, bishop to e4, f takes e4, and now after move rook to a4, Wang Hao creates already a very beautiful checkmate threat. b3, queen to e5, a beautiful check. We had king to b1, bishop to a3, a3, trying a checkmate. We have rook to c3. Now Wang Hao took here on e4, really nice stuff. And here after move queen to g3, king to h6. Even king to h6 was a possibility because there are simply no good checks anymore for white. We had here this line, queen takes e5. We had rook to e5, and here after rook takes e5, we had the rook to d1 because you don't want to take, of course, your rook is hanging, so it was a very important intermediate check. After king to c2, now a new check. Now after this one, rook to c3, rook bishop to f6, and here after rook to g3, again this game led into equality. Still Wang Hao won the game because of many mistakes that his opponent Yang Zhu played, unfortunately, but as I said, it's a playable position again for white and for black. That's not the point of the video. I wanted to show you that there are many methods that you can apply. Here, for instance, in this position, like Wang Hao did after move bishop to f5, he played here also this queen to c7. He included the queen into the game, had some opportunities to include the rook on the d file, so it was again a beautiful game. So okay, let's see now different ideas. Let's see now this slightly more positional approach of blacks. Again, we'll have the 3 knights variation. This game that I wanted to show you now was actually out of the Ragozin defense, but with the same position, and that's the lines that and that is the defense that we'll analyze now in the continuation of our series, because the Ragozin defense is similar to the Vienna variation. So we'll analyze now in the continuation of our Queen's Gambit Declined series the Ragozin defense, but it's a little bit different. I like more the Vienna variation. I'll explain you in the continuation of the series why, because of the fact especially that white has to always make a decision with the move c takes d5, but in the Vienna variation we're the one that actually are making the decision to play d takes c4. So white has always the opportunity to go into this exchange variation. On the other hand, in the Ragozin you don't have to do that. Of course, here in the Vienna variation still we can challenge white by playing the move d takes c4. As I said, this is now our last video of the Vienna variation. So as I said, in the future we're analyzing now the Ragozin defense. So but okay, same positions can happen out of the Vienna variation but also out of the Ragozin defense. Here we had this bishop to g5, and now we have basically reached the same position with the move e4. Now I wanted to show a really beautiful gameplay by Ding Liren against Magnus Carlsen. Here Ding Liren played now the move h6, and the problem for white in these types of ideas is that you cannot play bishop to h4. Then of course you get here bishop to g5. Even if you try some ideas of knight to g5, h takes g5, bishop to g5, but still we can step back and we can defend everything. So this is not something that white should do. So after move h6, bishop to f6, we can play queen takes f6, and now after move bishop to c4, now it's again time to simply break with the move c5. So you see, it is again a similar idea. Again, we want to break this white center because we don't tolerate these positions. We don't want to have this kind of position in which white has two centralized pawns, in which he could be really flexible. He could play d5, he could play e5. So this is not a pleasant game, so that's why you have to break it immediately with the move c5. But now white has a beautiful continuation with these ideas. He can play simply kingside castling, and now after c takes d4, white doesn't have to take immediately. White can play this very aggressive move knight to b5, and the game from this point on is again really wild. Although you have played the move h6, you got rid of your opponent's bishop, you have still the bishop pair on the board, but it's really not pleasant here to play the game, because we have to notice white secured the king by castling. White is also very active pieces that are dancing in front of your own king, so that's why you have to know what you're doing. After move knight to b5, queen to e7, preventing at least here queen to c7, we have here queen to d4, kingside castling, and now a beautiful move here by Magnus Carlsen, knight takes a7. Okay, you could play this one, bishop to c5, but here beautiful move again by Magnus, knight to c8. The queen is of course hanging, and now after rook to c8, we have reached now a new position in which, okay, black is here a situation where he's down a pawn, but has also now finally a very active piece, has now in the opportunity to attack further the a file. So it's an opposite colored bishop's endgame in which probably the game ends with a draw. So after move rook to c8, we have queen to d3, knight to c6, normal development. development. We have queen to e2, rook to d8, rook to d1, queen to f6, including now more pieces into the game. We have e5, we have queen to e7, and after queen to e4, obviously what Magnus Carlsen is preparing here is checkmate threat with bishop to d3. So here rook takes d1, rook takes d1, rook to d8, rook takes d8, queen to d8. Now we have g3, and after queen to b6 here, Dingler played a beautiful counterattack with the move queen to b6, and here in the continuation we have queen to e2, knight to d4, knight takes bishop to d4, and again this should lead into a draw. So this is, as I said, a beautiful counterplay here for white and for black, but don't be so scared because after move, let's go back, here d takes c4. As we said, we play e4, h6, bishop to f6, and now bishop to c4, c5. You have to break and enter. Now after c takes d4, white doesn't have to take. Queen, knight to b5 will happen for sure. There are some problems around the square c7. You have to solve them with queen to e7, queen to d4, and now kingside castling is perfectly fine. Knight takes a7, bishop to c5, doesn't matter. Here knight takes c8. This is now a line that you play many times. You see many games in this position. We have Sam Shankling against Anton Guaro, Boris Grachev against Inarkiev. So again, these lines are played really by the top grandmasters. So this is it for our Queen's Gambit Declined series with the Vienna Variation. As I said, if you have maybe some suggestions of the opening, please suggest, because maybe you have problems with particular lines of the opening, and of course we can cover them. I think we have covered so far the most important tactical ideas, but the most important strategical ideas of the opening. As I said, also in the continuation, we're continuing with the Ragozin defense, which is in my opinion similar to the Vienna Variation, not the same but similar, and I think we'll have also some fun by analyzing the sharp line. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you follow the series from the beginning, because we have covered already very important strategical ideas. Please check out our previous analysis with some more tactical threats and strategical moments of this opening. And if you want to see our whole Queen's Gambit Declined series, here's also the link with some different variations. We have already covered Harvard's attack, Chigorin defense, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.